And consumers are so incredibly smart that I think that they can sniff that out. They can say, this doesn't feel genuine. This company, 6 months ago had nothing on their website about any of this. And then something's happened and now all of a sudden they're talking about this. And that disingenuousness is really damaging. And so what we say is, your brand story is a long-term game. Let's not be highly reactive. Let's be slow, let's be steady, but let's always offer value, whether that be to delight, whether that be to amaze, whether that be to educate, but really making sure that every communication that we're doing is in some way having an impact on the customer in a way that we want.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen and I'm your host. Today, we've got a very special guest, Owen Garrity, who is the visionary founder of FPW Media, established in 2013 with a mission to revolutionize traditional marketing by putting client needs first. FPW is not your typical agency. It's a powerhouse with 3 in-house divisions, brand, films, and merchandise that ensures seamless communication and innovative solutions for their clients. Welcome to the podcast, Owen.
Arlen, thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting things, brand storytelling specifically, and why it's one of the most overlooked ways to boost your e-commerce conversions. It's something that we hear a lot about all the time, storytelling and how stories sell, not facts and product figures and all of that type of stuff. Stories sell, but I think a lot of times businesses, and specifically e-commerce businesses, don't know how to go about doing it, and how does the storytelling part of it translate to increased conversion. So you're going to be enlightening us a little bit on that. But before we dive deep into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So I had a really non-traditional path to where I'm at today. And I think because of that, it's allowed me to be very focused on the story part of the marketing sphere. I started doing professional photography when I was about 15. I picked up a camera when I was 11 and, have one of those rare experiences where I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I wanted to tell stories via visual media. And so I jumped headfirst in, was lucky enough to get some opportunities at a really young age, and then, made the decision to drop out of school, start my company, and haven't looked back since. So we have 50 employees in the Pacific Northwest, all at our one facility, and then a number of international contractors round out our team. And we started as a production-only agency, so we were just photo, video, AR, VR. And then we've expanded to be completely full service with those 3 connected divisions, but really with story being at the core of everything we do. And so I'm excited to talk about it, get into it.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. And so you picked up your first camera, you said, when you were 15 and were hooked as far as photography is concerned?
Picked it up at first when I was 11, and then actually started doing it professionally at 15. So I think I'm probably one of the last people to learn photography in a dark room. Timing wise, it was right before digital had gotten cheap enough for people to be taught that way. And so started with that really slow process. And I encourage people who are interested in photography to go back and actually learn that way, because it makes you be really intentional about how you go about setting up a scene or a picture or anything like that.
Yeah, you're right. Very interesting. And you don't see too many people that are doing the old school film and, It's like, because these days, of course, everybody's so on the go. Everything is so
Everybody's got
quick
one of
on
these,
demand.
right? A smartphone
Ex-
in their
ex-
pocket,
exactly,
and
exactly. Why develop film when you don't have to? And that's it's
right.
interesting though. What is your take on, prior to the advent of these digital format cameras and everything? How does the actual resolution compare to actual film when we're looking at, I mean, we're constantly hearing about the 4K, the 8K, all of this resolution. The iPhone is constantly saying it's, I don't know what megapixels we're at right now, but they're constantly upping that. How does that really compare to traditional film, or is it any, can the eye discern the difference between that?
Oh man, Arlen, you're asking me to wade into a very hotly debated topic here. I'm going to make half of your audience mad, but no matter what I say,
Okay.
I would say that we've far surpassed film, or at least 35 millimeter film. Obviously, there's bigger formats, right? Nolan is
Sure.
still shooting stuff on 70 millimeter, which,
Yeah.
seen in the theater still looks better than, I would say, even like the Alexa wide format, film cameras, but or digital film cameras, I should say. Um, but as far as just resolution, right, the detail that you see, I would say that we far surpassed film, which is both a good and a bad thing. Where I think we
Okay.
still maybe haven't gotten as far as color representation and highlight fall off. Film, because it is an organic process, gives a life to images that, since digital started, everybody's trying to make their photos look filmic, quote unquote,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that
Right.
look, all the Instagram filters, everything that you use
Mm-hmm.
is really trying to get back to what film just naturally is out of the camera. And
Right.
so resolution is not everything. How colors are handled, how highlights and the darks in the image are handled, obviously matters as well.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I have seen this whole trend where people are putting these filters on where it's making it look like the traditional film. And there's always this whole nostalgia with it as well, that people are trying to go back to the vintage look. All of that is associated with, things from the past. So, yeah, interesting stuff. I think there still will always be a place, though, for that type of traditional look in the traditional films. And like you said, Christopher Nolan, there's a few filmmakers that are still keeping the tradition alive with the regular film format, despite where the direction of Hollywood and everything is going. Especially now that we've got all of this AI technology and text to video types of systems where you just type in a scene and it's just an instant displayed. So yeah, some interesting times. So it'll be pretty interesting in the next 5 years where things will be with regards to film and what's going to be the preferred format. But yeah, so today, as I mentioned, we're really going to be talking about storytelling. And as I mentioned, a lot of brands already know that it's really something they should be doing. But what role would you believe storytelling really plays in creating a strong brand identity, especially in this competitive market space that we're in the e-commerce world?
I think it's everything, actually. We try to put it at the center of all the work
Okay.
that we do with clients. And the reason for that is, the last statistic I saw was that the average American sees upwards of 3,000 ads a day, and it goes even higher if you're in a large
Wow.
metro area. That's between what you see like on the subway, what you see online, what you see when you're scrolling on Facebook. And so the ability to cut through that noise is highly reliant on, obviously, platform, time, targeting, all of our traditional digital marketing or e-commerce funnel type activities. But if we don't have a story or something that's value add to the potential customer, why are they going to click on it? Why are they going to come to the store? Why are they going to potentially consider spending their hard-earned money to buy the product? And then I think what a lot of brands sort of neglect to factor in all of that is they're looking at only their primary conversion. They're just looking at, is somebody going to click and buy this thing? Well, most brands, not all, but most, can look at lifetime customer value, right? They can look at, okay, I can sell this person this product once and I'm going to have X conversion cost to do that. But in theory, that person, once they've bought, should be way cheaper to sell to in the future. But the only way you're going to do that successfully is if you've built brand equity with that person at every touch point that they experience with you as a brand. And so what we find is that brands that don't prioritize story start to struggle with that. They're not going to see the lifetime customer values that brands that prioritize story do. They're not going to have the customer loyalty, right? They're going to be much more price dependent. And even if you're running a discount site, you can still have brand loyalty, right? I mean, look at Amazon. You talk about Amazon, like people don't necessarily think that they have this brand story, but they absolutely do. They were the disruptor. They're so popular because they were the online bookstore. They were these things that nobody had done. And then they were the fast shipper, right? Amazon Prime. Now they don't even live up to that promise anymore for the most part. Like that's not their story anymore, but we, the consumer, still associate that speed. We still associate that story with who they are because they did a really good job of telling that story along the way. So even far after the fact, as a brand, when you're no longer telling a specific story, if that story resonated with your consumer, they're still going to know that story. They're still going to have that internalized, and you're going to get business year over year from the story that you told even 5 years ago.
Interesting. If from the very beginning, like you were saying, being able to tell your narrative and then have that resonate with the audience. Yeah, it's interesting to see that could carry through the lifetime of your relationship with it. Of course, I know there's things you have to do to kind of keep it going. You can't just give the story there at the beginning, the outset, and then not keep your customers involved in your brand story, how you're evolving as a brand, what's going on with your team, what types of things does your brand stand by with regards to, these days there's so many things that people are concerned about when they're purchasing brands, from sustainability to what types of things do they stand by culturally, all of that type of stuff. And so you have to, once you get them on the bus, so to speak, you got to keep them there and keep them along with you on the journey. So I could see that.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, right? Because I think we have a lot of conversations with brands who are wondering how they wade into some of those conversations.
Yes.
And it's a lot easier today than probably ever to do brand harm, right? And so where we really try to steer the majority of our brands, unless they have a wholly unique product, right? If you have a wholly unique product, you get to do this very luxurious thing, which is just talk about how unique your product is and to tell a story about the innovation. And that's all you get to do. And that's all you need to do. But if you're selling something in a more competitive space, you have to convince the person why you are better. And not better necessarily just in this arbitrary sense, but better for them, better for their need. And how are you going to connect with them? And so I think what we see is these brands try to align themselves with the views of their perceived customer. But oftentimes that goes wrong when, one, does the brand really feel that way? Two, is it really possible for a brand to be this ever sort of like feeling? It's not a person, it's a brand, right?
Yes.
It's a whole bunch of people, of individuals that have worked to create this product, this experience. They have diverse views. They don't always necessarily think exactly in the same way that their customers do. And so we try to tell people to thread that needle as much as possible, to offer value via story, but not necessarily to pander, right? It's so easy to say, oh, we believe in this thing or that, whatever sort of the cause of the moment is. And while maybe those brands in some instances are doing good work, I think oftentimes it's just sort of lipstick on a pig, right? It's window dressing. And consumers are so incredibly smart that I think that they can sniff that out. They can say, this doesn't feel genuine. This company, 6 months ago had nothing on their website about any of this. And then something's happened and now all of a sudden they're talking about this. And that disingenuousness is really damaging. And so what we say is, your brand story is a long-term game. Let's not be highly reactive. Let's be slow. Let's be steady. But let's always offer value, whether that be to delight, whether that be to amaze, whether that be to educate. But really making sure that every communication that we're doing is in some way having an impact on the customer in a way that we want.
Yeah, for sure. That interesting. You mentioned impact. I think where the impact actually comes into play with the end customer is, I think, it's an emotional impact that you're having on that customer when you are telling your story and you're bringing them into, the fold of what you're doing. You're not just kind of a monolith out there just selling product, and it's just, there's just a brand, and there's no personality, there's no people behind it. But I think when you tie into people's emotions, then then I think is when the storytelling aspect of it is really clearly seen. I'll give you an example. I'm a huge Shark Tank fan. I think I've watched every single episode of every single season of Shark Tank. And one of the companies that has been hugely successful, they got a deal early on, several seasons ago, several years back. I believe it was Damon John that invested in them. Bombas socks, if you're familiar with that brand, they sell unique, colorful socks, and part of their mission is to donate a portion of every sale to, a charitable mission. And they've partnered with, thousands of, I believe, organizations that have given out clothing to, rehab centers, homeless shelters, all of that. And so it's, when you see something like that, you're immediately putting out there to your potential customers that, as a brand, this is really our mission. Of course, we want to sell product. We want to make money. We want to be successful, but we have a heart. And at the end of the day, we're concerned about, the unhoused individuals, people that are, living on the streets, and then people that are in these rehab centers that are just trying to get their life back in order and don't have the proper clothing. And so when you put that out there, I think that emotional attachment is something that is that brand shouldn't take lightly, because people really connect with that. And I think especially nowadays more than ever. I just know myself personally, when I'm looking at a new brand online and I'm looking at their site, I'm always looking at their mission. I'm looking at I'm looking at about what the founder's about. If I don't see it on their website, I'm looking up, I'm either using ChatGPT.
You're on Reddit or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking up what the founders are up to. I'm looking at their LinkedIn. I'm trying to figure out, okay, who are these guys? Who are these ladies, or whoever it is, and try to get that backstory. And that's what's something I think people are hungry for trying to figure that out. And so I think it's really essential for a brand to put that out there. Now, you mentioned earlier that of course, brands can do harm if there's certain things that they do put out there that aren't genuine. What would you say are some common mistakes that brands make when they're trying to implement storytelling into their marketing that you've seen?
Yeah, I think, you have to make sure that you are walking the talk, right? So if you're going to wade into some sort of social cause or have some sort of benefit statement beyond just the fact that your product is good, that your customer service is excellent, that you treat your employees well, stuff like that feels a little bit more standard, right? If you're going to go beyond that and tell like the Bombas story, for instance, or something along those lines, you need to make sure that you're actually going to do that and you're committed to that for the long term. I think that, the consumer that resonates with, because it doesn't resonate with all, right? But the ones that it does resonate with want to see that over the long term. They want to see that you as a brand are actually committed to what you're saying, that you're not pandering to them, that you're really doing those things. Number two, where we see brands go wrong is not having an ideal customer profile well enough defined and not understanding who that customer is, right? I think we've seen a lot of brands recently step in one direction or another that they've then regretted from their positioning, their public statements at the cost of their customer base. And so I think you have to understand at this really deep level, if you're going to tell stories that are in any way incendiary or in any way controversial or just even political at this point in time, right? I mean, political is incendiary and controversial by design right now, unfortunately. Sure. That's just the world we live in. And so as marketers, I think you have to be really careful and really non-emotional when you're talking about that. We need to understand that if we're going to make these type of statements, they have to resonate with our customer. Just because they play well with the board or they play well with the market doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to play well with their customers. And so it's a lot harder to get a customer back than to get a customer in the first place, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think, what we see is, again, just slow, steady, don't be too overly reactionary, but focus on your core mission, right? The Bombas thing works because it's so genuine, right?
Right.
That is something that's so integral to their story that as long as you're staying close to that core, and as long as you're telling stories that evolve off the center of who you are as a brand, it works. I think when you get too far out from who you are as a core brand, that's when it starts to devolve or fall down. And I think also the third thing we see is that oftentimes it's better to say nothing than to say something. I think we see brands feeling like they have to enter conversations constantly. And, what we work with our clients a lot on is you don't always have to comment. You don't always have to
Mm-hmm.
throw your hat in the ring and say something. Sometimes silence is very powerful, and you should consider that as an option. Because again, in today's environment, with how politicized everything is, with how easy it is for something to become a trending topic, again, you need to stay genuine to who your core values are as a brand, and make sure that you're communicating in a way that's concise and clear, and adding value, right? Adding value to who you're talking to. Don't
Right.
talk just to talk.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually brings up my next question. When you're saying don't talk just to talk, let's say I'll give you a hypothetical scenario. If let's say you're an e-commerce brand startup, you're just kind of fresh out of the gate, getting a little bit of traction with your product sales. And you hear this whole podcast and you've heard other talks about messaging, storytelling. What would you say should be their first step they should take to building a brand story, especially if they're in a position where, they're not a Bombas socks. They don't have a whole social mission. They're not really concerned too much about sustainability. Let's just say it's a couple of founders that are just trying to make some money. Nothing special about it. These guys are just the plain ordinary guys. What do you do in that case when you're trying to complete or create rather a compelling story?
Yeah. So what we would do is we'd go through an exercise, say we have the founders in a room, we're talking to them, they've come to us, hey, we need to create this story, we need to do this marketing campaign. And we'd ask
Yeah.
a bunch of questions about their why, right? Not the why of like, oh, we want to make money. Well, of course, that's business.
Right.
If that's not
Right.
true, nobody's doing business. That's the reality. So
Right.
that's true. But the consumer doesn't care or really want to know about that. So, but they obviously have gotten to this point. They've made all these sacrifices they've taken all this risk for a reason. And that reason could be that they think they can do it better, or that there's a gap in the market, or that their product or their way of producing or serving the niche is so much better. And I think that just that little nugget is so undervalued. People think, especially when they're close to it, that somehow that's boring, somehow that people don't want to hear that. And that's just not
Mm-hmm.
true from what we've found. People are really interested in that. They love the why. Why did this hungry startup come and try to disrupt this huge industry? That's a really powerful message. You don't have to have all these other things yet. You can have your corporate responsibility statements. You can have all that down the line. But when you're starting out, it's that core, right? And when I keep talking about the core, it's the why. Why do you exist as a brand? Why should people, give a shit? I don't know if we can cuss on here, but that's really, you can bleep me out, but why should they care? And I think that's where people, for whatever reason, if you're so close to it, you disconnect from that. But we try to tease that out, and that is the easiest story to tell when you're starting out as well, because it's your story. And so you can lean into that really heavily, and people will connect with that.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So regardless of how kind of mundane it may seem, or the reasons behind why you the founder are putting this brand out there, you have to just share it because it's just genuinely yours. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you. And
yeah, I mean, I think you have to share it in a way that is the best version of reality. I think we always say that good marketing is the shiniest version of reality.
Right.
And it means that we don't ever want somebody to be just disingenuous, but we do want to present the best version of what is true. And so I think it's, how do you take your why? How do you take your story, polish it up until it's bright and shiny, and then put it out into the world.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. Yep. I like that. The shiniest version of the reality. And yeah, like you said, you're not embellishing anything, you're not making things up, but you're putting it out there in a light that's going to be attractive and interesting to, most of the prospective customers. So I
Absolutely.
totally get it. So regardless of how the brand started, there's always some type of backstory behind it, and no matter how mundane you may think it is, it's something it's worth sharing because somebody is going to be able to connect with it, and those are like most likely going to be your customers and long-term customers. Well, Owen, as we get ready to wrap things up, I'm going to kind of pick your brain about the evolving brand storytelling in the future as far as e-commerce is concerned. What advice would you give businesses that as we go down the line 5-10 years from now, what are some things you would say that they should do now to be able to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is a word of caution. I think there's going to be, especially on the smaller brand side, a desire to just automate all of it, right? To just have
Okay.
AI do it for us all.
Right.
And that's a very attractive thing. I understand that because it's really cost competitive. It's a lot easier. It takes these founders time who have no time and allows you to pump out a bunch of content. But what I would say is that it still has to be genuine. So the things that
Okay.
we evaluate as far as when we were talking about this in the beginning, all those things still need to be true regardless of how you are doing the thing. And so as we look to the future, that trend is going to continue. The tools that are available to us as brand storytellers is going to continue to expand. Also, the channels by which we can reach people are going to continue to expand and fragment, right? If we look now versus even say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, even just the amount of social platforms we have available to us, right? It's more and more fractured. It used to be that it was just a select few, but now these platforms are sort of mushrooming out, and no one platform is as dominant as it was. And so that type of thing is just going to continue. And so again, it's making sure that you have a concise story and a very genuine story across all of those platforms. But then it's also the other part I would say is making sure that you have a space that you are directing people to that is wholly under your control, right? What I see with some of these brands is they've leaned so heavily into social media that the only meaningful conversation or news about them as a brand happens on a platform that they have zero control over. And what you
Right.
see is an algorithm change happens, you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that there's many stories we could list off a whole bunch of brands that's happened to. And so you have to make sure that you're using all these tools, but that you're understanding that unless it's your site that you own, you don't have control over what could happen tomorrow. And so making sure that you are positioned and not overly exposed on any given place so that you can still reach your customers, that you have as much of your first party data as possible, that you have a plan to leverage that, and that you have this story that you stick to throughout the whole process.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. You want to make sure that you're not overexposed in one particular platform. And that's pretty clear today because for the past few years, we keep getting this chatter about TikTok being banned in the US. And so,
Yeah,
who knows
right.
who knows if that's going to happen. But like you said, if a brand is overly exposed in TikTok and they're getting the majority of their customers from there, if that goes away in the US, that could really be very detrimental to a brand. And that could, it could really shut a brand down. So I think things like that are what you have to be mindful of. And not only just, an anomaly situation like that of the government shutting down a social platform, but just the fact that some of these social platforms could be fly by night where, one year it's the hot new thing. And then, 5-10 years down the line, there's something else that's got everybody's attention and eyes are all going to this new platform. And then once that happens, then, you've built all of this social, social following on the one, but once that goes away, then it's like you lose it. So I really understand how it's important to make sure that's managed by your own brand on your own sites and everything that you can control as far as the relationship is concerned. So, yeah, totally makes sense. Well, Owen, as we get ready to close out, before we let you go, I always like to switch gears here just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself that you think we'd be interested to know.
Fun fact about myself is that one of my hobbies is gardening. People are always really surprised by that, but it's where I work out a lot of my business challenges and so forth. There's something about not being able to grow things that is very humbling and brings you back to earth, literally, with your hands in the dirt.
Got it. That's awesome. Good stuff, man. Got a little gardening fun fact that actually came about a few weeks ago here. I live in Florida. This may be of interest to you. The front of my house that I bought this house about 2 years ago, I've got these agave plants. Are you familiar with the agave plants?
Yeah, I'm a big tequila fan. Very overly familiar with the agave plant.
Okay, gotcha. So I got 3 pretty big ones in the front. And then a few weeks ago, I noticed out of 2 of them, long shoots that just seemed to almost overnight, they grew out of the middle of them. And I'm like, what the heck is going on with these things? Is it going to, I thought they were going to just sprout out and form other layers. But what I did was I took a picture of it and I uploaded it to ChatGPT, as I always do most stuff. And it basically said they're at the end of their life. What they do is they sprout up. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they sprout up these stalks and they're going to eventually bloom. I can kind of see flowers.
And that's going to be seeds, right?
Yes, and then they pop off and form what's called pups. Then when those actually will grow smaller agave plants around the base of the dying one. So I was like, wow, that's really interesting because, I didn't know what was going on. They just, out of nowhere, 2 stalks just shot up and they're like at least, wow, I want to say 3, almost 4 feet tall now at this point. So really, really interesting. So gardening awesome. Fun fact. Yes. So, but from what I'd read, pretty cool stuff. From what I've read, those plants can last upwards of 20, almost 30 years. And so it probably was there from when this house was first built. And I guess we'll just have to see
now you can have a whole bunch more if you want.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to drop off. So I'll have to see. I'll keep you posted once
sounds good.
Something happens. But yes, thank you for sharing the gardening fun fact. I appreciate that. Lastly, before we let you go, we've learned a ton. We appreciate you being on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. But if anybody wants to reach out to you and pick your brain any more about storytelling and how they can effectively use that in increasing their conversion rates, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Absolutely. Best way to reach me is at fbwmedia.com. That's my agency's website, or owengarity.com. That's GARITTY.com.
Okay, awesome. We'll be sure to have both of those links in the show notes for people to check you out and pick your brain. And it's been an awesome time talking to you, Owen. We really appreciate you coming on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast.
Thank you so much, Arlen. It was fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level, but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.